evening. Gardner City Council will come to order. If everybody that would like could stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we're going to begin this evening with some presentations and discussion of system assessments for the electric utility, water, and wastewater treatment facilities. Brian, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. Thank you. To help ensure our electric, water, and wastewater utilities are properly staffed, are properly maintained, are complying with the numerous regulatory requirements, and to have a plan in place for major component replacement, the city felt it was important to have assessments of all three utilities undertaken. In addition, the assessments will provide the new utility director with the current status of all three utilities. The engineering firm of Burns & McDonnell was retained to conduct the assessment. These assessments will provide the city with an analysis of utility operations and recommendations. Personnel from Burns & McDonnell presented the results of the assessment to the Utility Advisory Commission on February 5th, and are here this evening to present their findings and recommendations to council.
Very good.
Good evening. Thank you very much. My name is Ted Kelly. I'm from Burns McDonnell. I'm a senior project manager and principal of the firm, and I was responsible for overseeing the review of the electric system. So I'll talk for just a few minutes about that and then turn things over to the other side. In general, though, I wanted to cover with you kind of an overview of what we did for the assessments. We examined all three of the utility systems. We looked for regulatory compliance issues. We looked for operation and maintenance issues, how things were being done, what might be of concern. We looked overall at the staffing and the training that's provided to the staff, and we looked at the capital improvement programs. In completing those assessments, we considered the city's 4 strategic goals as far as economic, promoting economic development, maintaining the quality of life, improving the fiscal stewardship, and increasing asset and infrastructure management. From the electric system, the overview of that system, we looked at the generation station, which consists of the 2 gas turbines, Unit 1 and Unit 2. They're both GE Frame 5 units. They've been maintained. They're older. They've been maintained properly. There are some things there that will need to be addressed over time to make sure that they can operate when needed and called upon. They serve a value at this point in time as far as having that capacity available to call on as needed. The transmission distribution system, we looked at the substations, Substation 1, which is out of the power plant, Substations 2 and 3. We also looked at the overhead transmission system, approximately 4 miles of transmission line. There are about 46 miles of overhead distribution circuits, single-phase and 3-phase circuits, and about 94 miles of underground. We did not look at specifically digging up any of the underground circuits. They're operating, so you're not going to dig those up. Currently, you're serving approximately 7,700 customers. Sales of about 140,000 megawatt hours on an annual basis. Your peak load is around 40 megawatts. So our findings then, as far as in 3 key areas, regulatory compliance, we found that you are in regulatory compliance for the gas pipeline that serves the power plant. You're handling that compliance through your contract with Black Hills Energy. Since you have no personnel to maintain the gas pipeline, it makes sense to contract out as part of that service. On the electric side, you have some things to take care of as far as some NERC requirements for critical infrastructure protection. You're handling that through your contract or through a contract arrangement through TMEA. They're helping provide that.
Real quick, Ted, when you use an acronym like NERC, you might want to say what that means. There's people in the audience that probably are unfamiliar.
Yeah, basically it's North American Electric Reliability Group. So they're making sure to protect the infrastructure that serves different communities and the nation as a whole. So they have some specific guidelines that you have to make sure you take care of. And at this point in time, the system's doing a good job of handling those by the stuff that's being done internally and by the contract arrangements that you have in place. From the operations and maintenance side of things for the system, your operation and maintenance is consistent, your practices are consistent with electric utility standards. You're maintaining the system in a proper manner. You have the equipment in place it should be. And the way it's being done is very similar to what other systems are doing of a similar size. So we didn't uncover any problems that we saw from the way you're operating that system. From the staffing side of things, that's the area that we see that there's a little bit of concern. We understand that you are going to be filling the current staffing positions that are open. Once that staffing is in place, then we believe you will be adequately staffed to handle the system as it exists today. As the system continues to grow, you may have to address some growth issues and have additional staff at that point in time. We do believe that your certifications that you have for employees, the programs you have in place, and the experience of the employees are very appropriate. We think you need to make sure and address and implement a succession planning process. So as people leave, you can handle that. Those are very critical. The other thing that there's some actions that we believe are a priority of immediate consideration. We think you should consider adopting an asset management system which will help you to enhance your maintenance programs, and that asset management system can apply to the electric, the water, and the wastewater. I'll let Larry talk about on the water and wastewater side what that could mean. There are different systems that are out there that could be put in place. A lot of those systems will serve all three types of utilities, and you can implement that type of system over a period of time. What it does do is it helps you, as personnel leave that have that institutional knowledge, you actually have a system in place that's telling you things, notifying you of certain requirements or timings for when some of the things need to be addressed from an operations standpoint. As far as high priorities, we believe one of the things you need to look at is upgrading your existing SCADA system on the electric side. Your SCADA system is kind of a vintage program. The software is a little bit dated. So as far as upgrading that may be an upgrade to the software itself, because there's a way to do that and upgrade your systems, or it may be a new system. And I think you're currently evaluating that. You have someone helping you on that side to evaluate which way is going to be best for you. And as I understand in talking to Dave, there'll be some stuff coming forward in a future meeting. We also believe that you should complete the upgrades out of the generation station. The generator controls need to be upgraded. They're dated. And then there's gas and fuel regulator valves that should be upgraded. So take care of those concerns. And then the final item that we had as far as a higher priority is a program that you currently have in place. You're working on some Substation 1 upgrades. We think you need to complete those. And that's basically upgrading the transformer and the oil circuit breakers. So that's the findings on the electric side. I'll turn things over so we can talk about water and wastewater, and then when they get done, we can answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much.
Larry?
Let's try this. You might not be able to see me over there, though. Okay. So, good evening. My name is Larry Close, and I also have Jeff Keller and Jeff Klein here. And so we're switching gears here to the water and wastewater utilities, utility assessment. So this provides a high-level overview of the two wastewater treatment plants. And for the utility assessments, we really focused on the inside the fence, if you will, at the two, the water treatment plant and the wastewater treatment plant. There are other parts of the system, the collection system and distribution system, that we did not focus on. Some of the things I want to highlight here are is the permitted capacity, and then talk about the staffing a little bit as well. So on the water side, the critical number that we're comparing or looking at here is the max day, and that's about 3.33 historical number, and that's about 83% of the water treatment plant capacity. We would recommend around the 85 to 90% capacity that the city start looking at additional plant expansion, possibly additional water sources if that's a need as well. So it's a critical. So it's a critical piece, and especially considering the city council's strategic goal of economic growth, and which is going to translate into additional water demand and additional wastewater production. So it's a critical piece. And then for the wastewater treatment plant, we're really more focused on the average day. That's what the permitted capacity is for on an average day basis. So there's quite a bit of capacity there, right? Probably about 55, 56%. And so there's excess capacity available at the plant. There is and I'll talk a little bit about compliance later in the presentation, but the other way you need to look at the wastewater treatment plant capacity is based on organic loading, and so I'll talk a little bit about that later in the presentation. On staffing, both the water and wastewater treatment plants are adequately staffed for the complexity of the system and for the size of the system, both in terms of number of operators as well as years of experience. The one recommendation that we had, though, is that it would be good if there was a progression, and so and at other facilities you'll commonly see supervisor, senior or lead operator, senior operator, entry-level operator. That's something to consider as well. And so now I'm going to be focused more on the remaining recommendations for the water treatment and wastewater, starting with the water. And so we're aware that the city council has budgeted for a filter media replacement, and we're recommending that you perform a filter evaluation before moving forward with that. A filter evaluation, the scope for that type of evaluation can be, it can include quite a bit, or it can be, or it can just look at type of media that you should be replacing it with. And we think at a minimum, you really should be looking at the appropriate media and the thickness as well, and before you actually do the purchase of the media replacement. Otherwise, you really don't know what you're just simply replacing what you have, and you may need something different. Filter nozzle replacement, that's something that could also be evaluated as part of the evaluation. And Ted talked a little bit about a maintenance management software system. And from the wastewater and water side, both treatment plants, they have a manual, paper-based procedure, if you will, to track maintenance of equipment, which can be cumbersome if you need the system to give you some valuable information on, say you want to look at how much time has been spent and dollars been spent on replacing pumps or a particular pump. That's something that's very difficult to try to pull out of the current system as it is now. And so a computerized maintenance management software system, we refer to as SIMS, would go a long way for improving asset management at the plant. We talked a little bit about capacity already. There's some tanks at the water treatment plant that have some visible cracks and some leaking, and without additional investigation, our condition assessment was fairly high level, and without doing additional investigations, it's really difficult to understand just how bad the cracks are, or what kind of priority for repairs. And so we're recommending that you begin an investigation now to try to identify just how bad the cracks are. The remainder of the recommendations or high priority items are mostly related to pumps, chemical handling, and a security assessment. For the pumps, we were looking at either replacement or rebuild. And for the most part, we were recommending rebuild. It's a great way to extend the life of the pumps. And then on the raw water pumps, we were actually recommending a replacement. Based on information from the operators, they, on an annual basis, are doing quite a bit of work on those pumps, and which would seem to indicate to us that for that style of pump, it maybe it's a wrong application. And there's a number of things you might look at for the proper application, but we would expect that you shouldn't have to do repair every year. And it's a reliability issue. You could probably continue to rebuild pumps and on the intake, but it's a reliability. I mean, if the staff wasn't able to make the repair soon enough and you had multiple pumps go down, then you could jeopardize the whole entire system. So that's why we have it on here as a replacement. The chemical feed, or the chemical recommendation here is related to a safety issue. The staff has to frequently handle this chemical. It's a very aggressive, and it's just a safety hazard. And for that reason, we wanted to put it on here as a high priority item. And so with that, I'm going to be transitioning into the wastewater side. And so some of the things overlap, but the SCADA system is, for the most part, is the original that was put in the original construction in 2001. And so it's normal to have to do SCADA upgrades. The plant staff has been maintaining the system well, but it's becoming increasingly difficult to find replacement parts for the existing SCADA. So they've been overhauling it as one by one and working their way through. It would be, and so we're recommending that they do a SCADA update. Talked already about the SIMS program, and then the UV disinfection. It's the most expensive item on the table, and it goes back to a reliability issue and a compliance issue. During wet weather flows, the plant staff is having to replace bulbs, and they've indicated that they think it's the orientation of the bulbs in the pipe, and changing that out to improve the orientation would decrease the bulbs breaking. And so again, this is really a reliability and a compliance issue. We can talk more about that if you have questions, but I might just move on here. And then on the compliance, and I referenced this earlier when I was looking at the overview of the two treatment plants, but in terms of compliance, there are two drivers that are coming out of the Kansas Department of Environmental Health, KDHE, that could impact the treatment plant. The main one is they're changing the way they manage phosphorus in receiving streams. And so that change will be made final at the end of this year, and which will impact the next permit cycle, which is at the end of 2016. And so because of the strategic growth that the city council is focused on, we're recommending that a nutrient study be performed, and this would really give you the understanding of what kind of impact in terms of capital improvements would have to be done at the plant, and so we think it'd be really valuable for the council. In terms of immediate next steps for some of the really high priority items, again, the nutrient removal study for under regulatory compliance, operational review, again, you've got the SCADA replacement as well as the water treatment plant filter evaluation, maintenance review, the SIMS software, and instituting that enterprise-wide, which would be a great opportunity for cost savings and efficiency in terms of consistent platform across all the utilities. And then on staffing, creating the staffing progression at both plants. And with that, I'd open it up to questions.
Well, thank you for that, Larry. Questions?
I have a question on electric. Did you also just look inside the walls, or did you do an assessment on poles, maintenance, attachment?
Okay, we looked at inside the walls, but we also drove the system and did some spot checks of different poles. We didn't look necessarily at other individuals' attachments to those poles, but we were focused on the electric system and your structures and what's your property.
Okay, and you didn't find anything either from an existing perspective. What about just ongoing maintenance?
Certainly it's something that a prudent system, you're continually checking that. Yeah, you could probably go out and find a pole here or there that might need a replacement, but in general, we didn't see any big problems or any areas that are of major concern in what we've looked at. but it's something as the crews are out there, they're also looking if they identify stuff. And I know one thing that in most communities, and I think from what I heard here, your citizens will do a pretty good job. If there seems to be a problem, they'll call in and report it. And that's important, because you can't always spot everything.
Right, okay.
Real quick, kind of along the same lines, the electric utility has undergone a pretty aggressive tree trimming program for the past 6 years, 7 years. I mean, can you tell that whether or not that's been making a difference in regards to the poles that, and the overhead lines that Council President was talking about?
What those programs typically do, when you do an aggressive tree trimming program, it helps eliminate problems as far as the tree limbs getting into the lines, and it reduces the outages you have, particularly when you have storms, high winds, where limbs are falling into there, or coming across that and shorting things out. So certainly I've seen as far as the outage reports, we looked at those, and you would think there's a pretty strong correlation as you improve the tree trimming, that you reduce the outages.
Question on the SIM software. Is that, you mentioned most of the work you did was inside the gates. Does the SIM software function for outside the gates as well, particularly like on the wastewater and those kind of things, and in order to keep up maintenance on lines?
Yeah,
Lift stations?
Lift stations?
Yeah, it does. And really the systems can be as robust as you really need them to be. I know Ted's group has worked quite a bit with other cities and trying to match up the right program with what their needs were or are. And so, yeah, you can get them as robust as you need. Yeah.
Yep. And that's when I referred to how you could develop the system over time. You can focus on major things, and then you add features over time and build that system out to cover all your assets.
Yeah, I have a question about the water utility, and you were talking about capacity, and you mentioned that the 3.3 million gallons per daily maximum is about 83% of capacity. And you said when we hit 90% capacity, we'll really need to look at either expansion or a new facility to basically give us that ability to service our customers at that point. Knowing that we do have economic expansion on the agenda going forward for the next couple of years, and understanding the expense of specifically a water treatment facility more than anything else, would you recommend that we move toward expanding our existing facility? Is there capacity to expand our existing facility, or do we need to look at outside sources to furnish water at that point?
So it's a great question. So in late 2008, we did a water supply and treatment plant study. We also looked at, can the existing plant be expanded? It was, when the design build, Martin did that, it was supposed to be 2 MGD, expandable to 4, but that was supposed to be expandable to 6. Well, it doesn't really do 4 without submerging significant portions of the water treatment plant, so it's not expandable. In this study, we did potential layout for some additional new water treatment plants, as well as looking at Water One and Olathe as potential water suppliers. We could just purchase capacity and water through them. And it's, there wasn't any real one winner in. Now that study should be redone. And the thing you need to remember, or updated, you should say updated, not redone, is that if you want to build if you decide that you want to do additional water treatment plant capacity, which will fit on the site, which I think you can get up to 6 pretty easily with the Hillsdale facilities at the lake and the intake and such. And that's probably about a 3-year process.
Sure.
So really now's the time to plan and decide what the path forward is. If you want to go to Olathe or Water One, they're both continuing to build out here. Water One's going to be very close, but you still have to have time to negotiate a contract. There's a highway bore, a lot of approvals, a lot of permits. So that could be a 2-year project, just to get a drop of water from that line.
So you're saying, and I understand the big line that's coming down on our 75th on the Water One's putting a significant investment into. You would say your recommendation would be we start that process now if we're going to be looking at having capacity moving forward, we don't wanna hit that 90% threshold, obviously. So, I would say that we probably need to address that, in the next year or so with this.
I would say this year would be a good year to do an update to the supply and treatment plant study. When you look at that 3.3, that number, is 2007.
Yes.
So I don't know if the city's had any water restrictions, spent a lot of time talking with Jim Malvin in those in-between years. But I know the hope was to try to get to about 2016, when I believe it was, when some payments expire, and kind of allows you to pick up fresh debt without large impacts to the water.
Thank you.
No problem.
Is it, looking back at that same figure that Steve was talking about, when you talk about the 3.3 that we had as the maximum output, is it typical to see such a wide range from the average daily output? Because I think we went from 1.8 to 3.3, if I jotted it down, I don't have the numbers here, but is that a typical range, or is there a reason that might have driven that spike in 2007, we haven't revisited that sort of high since?
No, you'll typically factor, your maximum day will typically be about double your average day.
Oh, really? Okay.
And for systems that are very, very, very residential, with a lot of lawn watering, sprinklers, et cetera, you could easily be 2.5 to 3 times your average day.
Okay, great. The other question, a couple things, and I'm not sure if this was part of the evaluation or not, with the filter evaluation that you talked about, have we done a filter evaluation since actually installing, or is this something that hasn't been revisited since the time we put in the initial application?
I've talked with, it's not been done, I've talked with Don and Brian about it. You bring up, there's maybe close the present, or just hit escape, there's a slide. It's hidden, but you try. Yeah, they have hit escape, So what we did is, we talked to Don, and we got some of the information on the existing filter media. Last slide. And there's three things on the filter media. So this is the sand and the anthracite. You look at the specific gravity, you look at the size range, and you look at the uniformity coefficient. And that has to work with your backwash rate. So right now, your existing backwash rate is 15 gallons per minute per square foot. And that's the yellow line that's cutting across. Now your media E60 means that 60% of the media is smaller than that size. And it's basically the size of your media times the uniformity coefficient. And the specific gravity is set for, varies, you can see on the sand, you can see how it varies between 2.6 and 2.65, and can vary a little more on the anthracite. So what you want is, you want the media to be pretty close to your maximum backwash rate. And so we took the data, the spec that they did was very broad. Had a very, for instance, the sand was small, and it had a very large uniformity coefficient, meaning you get a lot more variation. But if you look at we'll call that salmon kind of color up top, it means that you would need about 18 to 22 gallons a minute per square foot to properly backwash your sand, depending on the actual size of the sand and what's actually in there. On the anthracite, you would need about 13.5 to 18 gallons per minute per square foot. So right now, your filters are lasting, the media is getting changed out about every 8 years, and we think they're not getting properly cleaned because of the design. They're backwash limited. Their run times are about half of what they were when they were brand new. And a lot of it's just the sand and the anthracite not being properly sized for the backwash rate. In fact, I'd say the sand's actually smaller than what KDHE likes. The anthracite's too small as well. And the uniformity coefficient's too big, so you can actually have too much variation, which makes it more difficult to backwash. So what we do in a filter evaluation is collect samples, have them analyzed, determine what the real sieve size is, what's the media that's remaining, what's the uniformity coefficient, and what's the specific gravity. So they'll test all that, and it could be that maybe the anthracite's okay, and we have, but maybe the sand needs to be replaced. So but you just don't know until you do that, and again, it can be done at a variety of levels. It doesn't have to be done all the way up to 35,000. That gives you a pretty thick report that looks at all kinds of things. In talking with Don, he also mentioned that there's some hydraulic issues with the filters, and which makes them difficult to backwash, meaning they're not necessarily getting all the water. I think that the filters are set up that the finished water from the filters is actually used to backwash the other filters. So it's kind of some convoluted piping down in the filter gallery. But it's something we would look at and try to come up with some recommendations to make sure that the media that's in there is the right media, the right size, and can be backwashed. And we'd like to see it up to at least more like 18, upwards of maybe 20 gallons a minute per square foot, if that can be done. But this has to be determined if we can actually get that much backwash water through that, which would then dictate how big the sand and the anthracite.
We'll go back to water real quick, if you don't mind. It's about the intrusion rate, and I think that we have been talking about intrusion in the past, about, loss of water in the system, and that's been a problem in areas of our system, and of course it costs the city and it costs homeowners money when we have loss of water in the system. Was that examined at all during any of this analysis?
Not a part of it, no.
We really kept it within the confines of the plant. When we did the study back in 2008, we did look at that, and I think it was pretty good. I don't know what it is in that okay range. I'm not sure.
Right, I think it's still in that okay range. We really don't, we account for all the water that we lose to the plant or that we use. We account for all that.
Sure.
What we lose it for is in the system, whether it's meters running slow, whether
Or
it's
lines that might be cracked.
even hydrant flushing.
Yeah.
We do try to account even for that, but there's just a lot of components that make that up.
Because the rate of intrusion or loss of water in the system would, to me, say that those are areas we want to work on with a maintenance program, try to identify those components and get those fixed.
And again, there's kind of some allowable rates of water loss. You can never get it all out of your system.
No, you won't get it all out.
Pretty good amount.
If you can get down to single digits, that's very good. 15% is kind of the norm.
Okay.
Kind of an average.
So we're pretty much in line with other municipalities in that regard, at this rate?
Yep.
Okay.
The last question I had, was one of the things for the priorities was a crack investigation. Is that something that's done internally? Is that something that staff investigates, or how do those come to fruition? Have that be a comprehensive investigation?
Typically, we have a structural engineer come out. It could be done a couple different ways. If you can take the structure out of service, drain it, you could have a structural engineer or a contractor or both come in and actually physically look at all the cracks and determine what needs to be done.
Okay.
Since you probably don't have a base, there's a lot can be done now. I mean, you can hire a diver to go in and look.
We actually had a diver in 2014.
But there's a number of ways those solutions can be implemented, but normally when you go in to do the fix, you want to do it from the inside.
Okay.
The problem is, one's your chlorine compactor, the other one's your clear well, and you can't just take them out of service for an extended period of time. It gets to be more complex, where now you have to find a way to bypass it and still disinfect the water and maintain your disinfection contact time.
I appreciate it.
No problem.
Go back to real quick on the UV system. That's a pretty substantial, what I read in the report was they're replacing bulbs, around $5,000. I don't know how often, but that's a lot of bulbs to replace, or it could be replaced for $2.5 million.
Right, right, and that's why the real concern is compliance and reliability. How reliable can the existing system be? And if the staff doesn't get out there soon enough or quickly enough and make the replacement, during a wet weather flow, then you run a possibility of an exceedance, of the permit, and, which, you know, you could get fined by KDHE. So that's the reason why it's a high priority. I mean, otherwise, yeah, you could, they could continue replacing bulbs.
I think that's a parallel system we currently have, and so there's two UV trains there. I mean, we have one, we rotate back and forth, high weather, or high water flows. Actually, both are in use, and so it's actually replacing two systems.
Right.
I mean, it's not just the one, there's two parallel, we'd be replacing both, about $1 million each.
And the other point we were gonna make in that is, since you have it's a piece of, process equipment that's actually in the pipe. It's not open and easy to see. And so if you imagine, then you have your operators taking a section of pipe out of service, opening it up and reaching in there to clean out chunks of broken glass, basically with their hands. So you have a safety issue, and that's water, it's a disinfection system for wastewater. So you're also reaching in there, it's clean, but it's not disinfected. So there's a safety, there's a hygienic issue, and there's a compliance issue. So you're right, I mean, the actual capital cost, the replacement cost for the bulbs is relatively small, but there's some other issues that drove us to put a higher priority on that. And there's lots of ways to address that issue. What we put in the proposed CIP was probably the higher end, just to make sure you're covered in terms of those contingencies. So depending on how the city would choose to interpret the right solution, at least you'd know where your high-end number is. Okay?
So regulatory compliance is kind of a moving target. It changes depending on administrations and things like that, correct?
It never really gets any easier.
Yeah.
It's a matter of how
Yeah.
how
No.
fast it goes the other way.
Understand that. But all three of these systems are substantially in compliance. These are recommendations to keep us out of hot water down the road.
Right.
That's right.
Kind of along that lines, actually, I have two other questions. Did you assess, you talked a little bit about, you know, the UV lights and going in and cleaning up glass. You know, I also know that we've seen in excess of things like hypodermic needles and things like that. So did you assess from a safety perspective at all three, kind of what our safety practices are, and are there any issues that you saw as far as any of that handling?
Yeah. Well, do you want to start?
No, go ahead.
So on the water and wastewater side, we did look at that, and that was, you know, during the condition walkthrough. We talked a lot with the operators on how they managed or did a lot of the updating and maintenance and those things. And on the water treatment side, that's the reason why we have the chemical handling CIP item on there, is because of safety and that the chemical is very aggressive. So we did look at that. On the wastewater side, like on the water side, one of the other things that they're looking at adding a third shift, and so they may have an operator by themselves at the treatment plant. That was one of the big concerns that we had, and so we discussed that as well. On the wastewater side, they have a similar deal. In the evening or at night, an operator can be called out to the treatment plant. But if they're going to do any type of work, they have procedures and protocols that they have to follow, and so they try to minimize the safety hazards. In terms of hypodermic needles, we didn't really get into some of those things. I mean, I know in a pre-screening preliminary treatment system like they have, you'll see a lot of that type of stuff, but normally you don't. Normally operators wouldn't be handling it. So.
We've really been fighting the hypodermic needles, whether it's in our overflow tanks, whether it's in our some of the equipment when we take it apart. We've actually had an operator get stuck by a hypodermic needle because some of the disposal places are no longer taking needles. Even a lot of people are just flushing them into the system, so it's a real problem that we're starting to encounter.
My second question is, and I don't know, this might be more for Brian just through the assessment, but in going out to both water and wastewater, there's different maintenance activities that have been done on large pieces of equipment that maybe out of the box to try and save money and make equipment last. Did we look at any of those specific examples and do an assessment to see, from a value perspective, was that truly the right thing to do? Did we get the value out of that, or should we have replaced the equipment?
I can think of one example, and that's there are some pumps related to the grit system at the wastewater treatment plant. And I know they had, when they were first installed, these pumps sit outside in a shed, and this little doghouse wasn't designed with heaters. So during the winter, the casing on the pump was cracking, and so basically it was total pump failure. I know as a intermediate fix, they had installed a heat lamp, and the staff also did some heat tracing, and but they now have a unit heater inside the shed, and so I think it's I think it's working just fine. I mean, even if you were to replace it with a brand new system, that's exactly what you would do. You would have a doghouse for the pump. You would put a unit heater in it. It'd have a thermostat, and it would automatically kick on and off. And that's pretty much what the system is.
Yep.
As of right now. That's the only one that I could think of. There may be others.
Well, I think a lot of things we've actually have prolonged the life substantially, but that's where the computerized maintenance software would really be helpful, because there's a tremendous amount of institutional knowledge, whether it's Don or Mike or Jerry or Scott or Steve. They know what needs to be done, but it is up there. And so starting inputting the equipment, the dates, the run times, those types of things will really be very helpful in the future.
Just one more quick thing. I thought it was kind of odd on the wastewater treatment plant, the lifts are, cranes, or what, not cranes.
Oh, the overhead cranes.
Yeah, I mentioned something about they were installed with indoor equipment. I thought that was odd.
Well, and
So it needs to be replaced, basically, with outdoor or updated.
that was the recommendation in the report is to update. What we think, and this is based on information from the operators, is the frequency that they're having to replace the electrical components in the control panel indicates that maybe there's water intrusion into the control panel, which would tell us that it's not really meant for an outdoor installation. That's also what the plant staff believes, is that and I'm not sure if that's based on if they really know what was installed. I mean, we couldn't confirm, but if it was meant for an indoor installation, that's probably what's happening. So in heavy rains, there's probably water intrusion, and it's impacting the electrical components, and so they're having to replace a lot of those components every time they go to use the crane. So that's what that's related to.
Anyone else? Gentlemen, thank you very much. The reports are very illuminating. I'm sure we're going to put them to very good use. Appreciate your time coming here this evening and presenting for us.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is public comments. Members of the public are welcome to use this time to make comments about city matters or items on the agenda that are not part of a public hearing. Anyone in attendance would like to make a public comment, please approach the podium, state your name and address for the record, and be heard.
Good evening, Council, Mr. Mayor. My name's Rich Melton. I'm at 521 East Hawthorne. Excuse me. I had a question for the gentleman, if that's okay. Is it possible to, on the UV lights, since they're breaking and having problems, switch it out with LEDs?
Unfortunately, no, because it's the UV radiation, and not radiation in a scary way, but it's the UV radiation that actually causes the disinfection.
Sure.
So there has been work on that kind of technology, but it's out there. It's way
Yeah, I
past
know it
the
works on
bleeding
smaller
edge,
applications.
right?
I didn't know about the volume of capacity you're talking about.
That's not quite there yet for your type of plant, but it would be great in the future.
I'll work on that. And then the other thing was on your needle problem. I didn't know if there was a way to put a magnet in line where those would collect.
We actually have in some of our areas, we actually have pick magnets on a stick that would go through to try to pick them up.
Right.
What we would actually, we'd love to see is some, additional drop-off points within the city, and education to the public about what that does.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Rich.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? If no one else coming forward, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there a council member that would like to remove an item from the consent agenda? If not, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Harrison, second Freeman, that we approve the consent agenda. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Consent agenda passes. New business item number 1. Consider appointment of Chief of Police. Cheryl Harrison Lee, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. The process of selecting the police chief was developed to be a collaborative effort to involve our partners, community partners, by involving the chair of the school board, to involve a member of the community, as well as the mayor and council president. We obtained the services of Mercer to assist with the search. We were able to have an interview process that was conducted by this panel that involved 3 components: a written component, a public presentation component, as well as a critical thinking scenario analysis. The committee, as a result of all those components, unanimously recommended the candidate that is presented before you tonight, Mr. James Fruiting. His career spans from 1984 as an officer to the current year in his role as a major in Kansas City. An extensive background check was done. That was conducted for the city by the Johnson County Sheriff's Office. Based on the extensive background, the input of the committee, the recommendation is for council to authorize the appointment of James Fruiting as the police chief for the city of Gardner.
With the presentation being completed, opportunity for public comment regarding new business item number 1. Anyone that has comments regarding new business item number 1, now's the opportunity for you to come forward and do so. With no one coming forward, questions for the city administrator or members? The council president and I were both on the selection committee. The questions regarding the interview process or the candidate?
I was wondering if the major is here this evening.
He is not here.
He's not here, okay. Looks like he does have a very extensive record in traffic and transportation.
Yes.
Both at KCMO as well as further down in other divisions and entities. And he has some experience as well with interagency cooperation, homeland security specifically, as well as Fusion Center understanding, so that's good to know.
He also has internal affairs, drug enforcement, and pretty broad.
Yes.
When would he be starting?
If appointed tonight, February 27th, he is anxiously awaiting word from tonight on whether or not it's confirmed.
I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Shute, second Harrison. We appoint James Fruiting as chief of police. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Thank
We
you
have
very
a new
much.
police chief, February 27th.
Thank you very much.
New business item number 2 is consider approval of a resolution authorizing the city administrator to execute a firm electric service allocation assignment agreement with Kansas Municipal Energy Agency and the Western Area Power Administration. David Green, good evening.
Good evening. Western Area Power Administration provides approximately 2% of our annual energy requirements. It's hydropower from the Rocky Mountain area. Our contract with Western expires in 2024. They have extended an offer to extend that for an additional 30 years to 2054. The kind of the long-winded way to go about this is we have a contract with the Kansas Municipal Energy Agency. They act on our behalf. They get the power for us. The city has been under contract for the Western Power for quite a few years. It was only in 2012, I believe, that we actually had transmission path to start receiving. As I say, since it's a very small piece of our power, roughly 2%, it's also our lowest cost source of wholesale power. Roughly over the past several years, the average is 41 41.75 per megawatt hour versus 54.09, which is the average. This was reviewed with the Utility Advisory Commission on the 5th of February. They're recommending that council approve this resolution, which would allow the city administrator to sign the contract. Originally, KMEA, Kansas Municipal Energy Agency, had requested that we get back with them by the 13th. I had told them that because of our meeting scheduled, we could not do it until tomorrow. They said that's fine. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but let me clear the podium.
Public comments regarding new business item number 2. If there's anyone in attendance, now would be your opportunity. There's no one coming forward. Questions for David regarding new business item number 2?
I see this as being just basically just clarification, it's an extension of our existing agreements, and really it's not, I know, it's an extension of our existing agreements, and it's really not any, any modifications.
That's correct.
So I don't see there being a real issue with this.
Right.
Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second. Motion Harrison, second Freeman, that we approve resolution 1920, authorizing the city administrator to execute a firm electric service allocation assignment agreement with the Kansas Municipal Energy Agency and the Western Area Power Administration, which would extend the city of Gardner's supply of hydroelectric power from the Western Area Power Administration until 2054. Freeman.
Yes.
Harrison.
Yes.
Roberts.
Yes.
Shute.
Yes.
Winters.
Yes.
Resolution 1920 passes.
Freeman?
David, thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is consider an appointment to the Utility Advisory Commission. At the March 18th meeting in 2013, we adopted the governing body rules of procedure, and after the resignation of Randy Grigorsic from the Utility Advisory Commission on January 9th, we began the recruitment process again for a Utility Advisory Commissioner, and went through all of the steps that have been detailed in previous meetings. We had one applicant for this position, and that's Mr. Clint Barney. He was interviewed by myself, the council president, and city administrator Harrison Lee on February 13th, and yet managed to come out unscathed, even with the unfortunate date. So, he suggested that we the recommendation is that we appoint Clinton Barney to the Utility Advisory Commission. And that ends presentation. We would open up the floor to public comments regarding new business item number 3. With no one coming forward, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Freeman, second Shute, that I appoint Clint Barney to the Utility Advisory Commission, filling the unexpired term of Randy Gregorczyk, with this term expiring in January of 2017. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Clint, I see you back there. Welcome to the Utility Advisory Commission. Next item on the agenda is executive session. Before we exit into executive session, and we'll need a motion here in a minute to go, and we're gonna go in initially for about 30 minutes. However, realizing that there's people that are in the audience that may or may not want to wait 30 minutes, I can't say for sure, but I don't think we're anticipating any action based on the conversations in executive session. I'm going to go ahead and turn over a little bit of time for council updates prior to adjourning into executive session. So those of you that, I don't know, want to go watch the Jayhawks play, get a chance. So, easy now. You too, Jeff. Mary Bush, any updates for council? Jeff? Ryan?
No, sir.
Colonel? Looks good. Okay. Does council have any updates for staff?
Yeah, I have 3 items that I was going to mention, and actually I added a 4th, so bear with me. The first one I wanted to get some information on or an update on is the employee survey results. I know that those are being compiled. I was just wondering when City Council would be privy to the results of that. I would like to be able to see that if all possible. Do you have a response on that, either Mary or Cheryl?
Yes, we have the survey results, and we're going through, looking at them, identifying what the key priorities are, the key items that came up. And the plan is to be able to present them to the council. What we're hoping to be able to do is kind of meet with staff and develop kind of a way to address them before we bring them to council, because I think it would involve some council action.
Okay.
That we might, and some policy direction.
All right, thank you. So we don't have a specific time or date when that agenda is going to be brought to us?
No, we don't. As soon as we can get that detailed out in the timeline for you, we'll get that to you.
Okay. Second, actually the last 3 questions have to do with economic development, and I think that we've had discussions offline, yourself and myself and Chris on this. And so I wanted to bring this up. I'm looking at this from an infrastructure and economic development perspective, and I know that we have a CIP that we're formulating. And we talked about water, wastewater, and electric this evening. And we understand, one of the reasons why I asked about the capacity issues that we're having, particularly with water, knowing that we're going to have some growth and opportunities for expansion of our network, in other areas, specifically I'm thinking on the other side of I-35. I know that we had talked about a 175th Street study, and there was discussion about, the component of that related to consulting services for cost-benefit analysis. I'm going to ask, if I could, members of the council here that are behind the dais, what their thoughts were regarding expansion of Gardner's city limits, i.e. annexation, on the east and south sides of I-35, south of 175th and east of Gardner Road. And the question I have for the members on this dais is, are we committed as the city to have a presence on the other side of I-35? I mean, I'm just wondering.
I guess from my perspective, right now, none of the land on the other side of I-35 is annexed to Gardner.
That's correct.
It is the property owner's decision
Mhm.
where they want to annex. So from my perspective, of course, I think most of us would say, yeah, that's great, that's what we want to do.
Mhm.
However, I think there's some fundamental problems that need to be addressed, because we know those landowners, first of all, those landowners, for the most part, are individuals.
Mhm.
They're waiting for developers to come in, offer them money, and then the developers are gonna drive where they want that land to be annexed. Some of those conversations are happening already.
Correct.
So from my perspective, forget about the infrastructure. I mean, there's some fundamental things that we need to address with those property owners and with feedback from some of the developers to fix and address some things before we move forward. I mean, we can all sit up here and arbitrarily say, yeah, that's what we want, but we have to be committed to fixing problems before we get what we want.
And I understand that. The reason why I bring this up is because you have to know where you're going before you can create a roadmap to get there. And if we are saying as a council, our intention is to annex property east and south of I-35 between 175th and Gardner Road and east towards Hedge, then that's a strategic priority, a strategic decision that needs to be made. Once that decision is made, then we start to look at what needs to be done to make that happen. And right now, I think that to a certain extent, we're a little behind the curve on this, and I want to be able to get us to the point where we can start to foster those relationships. And that dovetails to my third point, which I want to talk about, and that has...
Actually, can I?
Yes, please, absolutely, please.
Thank you. I think that the council has already signaled, the governing body has already signaled their desire to develop on the east side of the interstate, both east and southward, through the adoption of the comprehensive plan.
Absolutely.
Because the area that you're talking about was referenced in the comprehensive plan as a growth area for the city. So I think that the commitment from the governing body is there already. I think that there's things that are getting put into place even as we